So if we're looking at our nonverbal communication, you've heard these adages that 93% of what we say is nonverbal. What makes me laugh about that is if that were actually true, I mean, taking it literally, it wouldn't matter if people spoke different languages because we'd still all understand 93% of it. Clearly, it's not talking about that. What it's talking about is expressing what we are actually thinking and feeling does happen nonverbally. That's what's happening nonverbally. So if you are a person who has a hard time making eye contact, for example, that sends a certain message. Right or wrong or fair or not, it sends a certain message. If you're a person who tends to stand with your arms crossed a lot and look angry and don't even realize you know what RBF is, right? Okay, same thing. So it's the attitude people think you have just because that's the outward appearance. Even if it's not intended, it's not.
It can be comfortable.
All right. Mm-hmm. I sit like that all the time. Yeah. And it was my dad that finally clued me into it. And he's like, you look angry all the time. And I thought that's an interesting interpretation of that because I would sit like this all the time. And he said, you just look like you're pouting all the time. I'm like, I'm not. I'm just comfortable. But there's attitudes that we express in our body language. Just be mindful of it. That's all. And make sure that if somebody points out a particular habit that you have like that you just pay a little attention to it and make sure that it's not hurting the people around you. Most of the time it's fine. One habit I had when I was younger, if I was really focused, my mouth was agape. Don't do that. Finally, somebody took a picture of me and I went, I look so dumb. So, I think that's what I was communicating anyway. All right, what you say versus what you do, what you show. 7% of that emotional meeting is actually verbal. So that means the rest of what we're saying is nonverbal. Nonverbal meaning the tone of your voice, which is technically verbal, but not the words you're saying. The tone, the softness, the speed with which you're talking, whether or not you're pacing, how you're sitting, whether you're making eye contact or not. If you are neurodiverse, that makes a difference in this. I have a nephew with Asperger's. Doesn't make eye contact very often at all. You have to know that about a person, or you have to at least leave space for that to be a possibility. There's a person I worked with recently who is brilliant. She's brilliant. Very difficult to work with, and would say things that were really, really hurtful. I mean, just even beyond kind of rude. It was like, wow, that was just hurtful. But she genuinely seemed to want to be around everybody. And I kept watching her and thinking, I think she's autistic. I think that's because it wasn't. If you were to point something out, she's like, what do you mean that was mean? I mean, she had no idea. And I'm still watching her struggle with a board that she's on. Yeah, I'm watching her struggle because you can't say. I mean, I suspect it, but I can't just go around going, yeah, I think she's autistic. I don't know, so I can't say that. But leave that possibility. What I will say is, for me, when I realized that's kind of the filter I was going to have to apply to her. In other words, like, look at her like Ian, like my nephew. My communication with her got a lot better, and I started taking things a lot less personally when she would. And here's the thing: one of the things that made me most mad about her, she would say things. She would say them in such a harsh way that it was almost hurtful. But she was never wrong. She was never technically wrong. It's like, damn it, she's not wrong though. Like, I wanted to be mad at her, but I couldn't be because she's not wrong. So, give the person a little bit of grace because we may not know. There may be something else going on non-verbally that is sending signals that we have no idea what's going on. And so just leave a little space for that. Excuse me. The perceptions that you want to challenge, how do your coworkers see you? Or challenge within your mind, I mean. How does your boss see you? How do your clients see me? And then how do other people see me? Do you think that people, by and large, see the same person in you? Yes, no? Yeah? Overall? Okay. No? You're saying no? Tell me the differences, if you don't mind.
I think I put on a mask for the clients and some of my coworkers. I think okay. I do that quite a bit. So I think that I can, when there's the coworkers that I've been with for 15 years or my boss, I tend to take that mask off. I think that kind of colors it. I see myself as trying to be a brave face sounds too dramatic, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, to my employees and especially to the public.
Okay. What's your role?
I'm a recreation superintendent.
Okay. Okay. Is it working for you?
I worry, because you were talking before the break about employees kind of flinching when it was time for a meeting. I was trying to give that positive feedback. And I think now that you say that, maybe I'm eroding a little bit of trust by having that mask up.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones are starting to pick up on that. The ones that have been with me for a little while. So
It is a really hard balance. It is. And the reason I'm saying that is you can't always remove the mask completely. I mean, you can't be the person at work that you are at home. And you won't be. And it would be inappropriate to be, because we're not going to be that raw and vulnerable with the people that we work with. So there is automatically a level of disconnect, of masking, if you will. But we got to get as close as we can to not having it. And so when I'm sitting at home talking to my husband, ask him, or just say the words observable behavior to him. I am this person all the time. Because he's like, if you say observable behavior to me one more time, I'm not mad. Well, your observable behavior. Anyway, my house is fun. Kidding. We have to be as close as we can to that true person. And to be fair, even the people closest to you in your life don't know who you really are. Only we do. I mean, we are the only people who truly know all of our ins and outs. And so asking yourself this question is really important. How do your coworkers see you? Is that different than how your boss sees you? We all know the person who brown noses the boss and then is different around everybody else. Anybody trust or like that person? Nope. How do your clients see you, or customers, or community? And then, how does your best friend see you? When I do, at least my favorite, there's a couple of different leadership assessments I do, but my favorite one is a 360 review. And it actually requires you to get 3 people who are not related to your work at all. So your best friend, your neighbor, your spouse, doesn't matter. You have to bring in 3 people who are not related to your work, because it's gauging a bunch of different things about you that are just personality traits. And what it does is it then represents this big picture of, hey, here's some blind spots. These people see you this way, but your best friend sees you completely differently, or your friend and your spouse see you completely differently. There's a problem. Because they should all at least see some consistencies. And in other words, you shouldn't be showing up as 2 totally different people in different areas of your life. And so think about that when you think about how people are seeing you. It's vulnerable. And if someone violates that vulnerability, you put the mask back up. I mean, it's that simple. We all put the wall back up, and may need to, because I don't want anybody being abusive to you. But try it. See if maybe taking it down a little bit helps, and maybe makes them a little bit more comfortable. I think we've covered all of these. Object, people ask sometimes what this is, the object nonverbal. That's like the type of stuff you have maybe in your office, or the clothes you wear. I told you I worked in victim services. You guys know South Park. Oh my God, they killed Kenny. Intern showed up in that shirt. And I was like, it's a really good example of object communication. You can't wear the, oh my God, they killed Kenny shirt to the victim internship. Can't do it. Okay. So there are certain things that, anybody know the person who has like the whole office is walled with the, what did they used to call those? I don't know, they have like all of the motivational sayings and then the landscape backgrounds in them, like from the 90s. You have a perception about that person, you do. So there's always this nonverbal going on with our objects as well. That's what that means. Delegation and success. All right. So some of you felt like you were decent at delegation. Most of you did not raise your hand, which scares me. The old definition, and by old, it's not that long ago, maybe early 2000s is when we saw a big change in this. The old definition is that you are evaluated by the results you produce. And in some industries, that's still true. But in most, it is not. including even in the kind of places you would think it would be true, like making widgets, you know. It used to be that I have to make 15 widgets a day. I made 15 widgets, great. It's all people cared about, I go home. Now we are really judged by what we lead others to do. So I may not have made 15 widgets today. I may have only made 10, but I led my team to make 35. And so therefore, collectively, I did a good job today. This is hard, and we are really struggling with this right now as managers, especially if you're a new manager or have new staff doing the job you used to do, because it feels like you're not doing anything. Like you're not getting credit for what you're supposed to be doing, or that's my job. I shouldn't be delegating that. No, you hired the person to do that job, and so they should be doing it. And the culmination of what that output is should be what makes you a good manager. I just did this with my team for a client who said, but we want to know what you're doing. And I said, take a look at what my team was able to do this year. No, I mean, it was a pretty remarkable year. But I'm working with somebody who's very old school this way. But how many widgets did you make? You know, that's where they're coming at me. And it's like, together we did all of that. You know, we brought in, it was some fundraising stuff that we were doing for this client. I do mostly leadership and management consulting, but this is a part of it, is getting sponsors in for this conference. And we doubled the sponsorships. But what did you do? And I'm like, oh my God, I did that. You know, so that's going to be your wall. Don't be the wall. You know, try to remember that you are managing people who are managing people. And so the collective is what's important there. It doesn't mean people can slack off. It just means that we're looking at if we're looking at a manager, we're looking at the team output as at least one of, or maybe even the most important factor there. If the person is a bad manager and not working hard, you'll know, because the productivity will drop. You will be able to see it. It is rare that the team picks up the pieces and runs with it without the manager doing so. And if they are doing that, again, you'll know it. You'll say, well, despite you, your team is doing great. But you'll know that. You'll be very aware because it's very evident. So don't also, remember that with your bosses as well. You may have people who are saying, but it was your job to do X, Y, Z. No, it was your job to manage that it got done. And so be willing to have that conversation. I want to know why you don't delegate when you don't delegate. And some of you don't delegate, well, all of you don't at some point, but what keeps you from doing it?
It's always drilled in my head, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
There's that. Okay. That's actually the second most common reason. Yeah.
What if the actual outcomes or the way to do it is nebulous? So I have a hard time communicating what the type of widgets I need to make are. So I'm going to just kind of muddle through myself. Am I conveying that? I'm not conveying
You
that.
are. No, I know exactly what you mean. And because I work in a field more abstract like that. So, because I don't have widgets. So, are people happy? You know, especially in recreation, are people happy? It's not even, let's say that you're running a basketball league and you have 5 people less than you had last time. That's not a failure necessarily. So figure out even the metrics of what would success be based on that. You know, what would success be? Is it that we don't lose a certain number of people? Is it that we gain a certain number of people? Is it that the people who are enrolled, regardless of the number, are happy with what they're doing and, you know, report back that it's a fun league to be in? So look for the metrics that are, number one, that are, well, think about it this way. What do you want for them? So just answer that question for yourself. You know, what do you want for the people that are coming in to engage in anything? You know, is it that 15 people come? Why? Why does 15 matter? Why not 20? Why not 10?
The ability to measure your mission is always difficult.
It's difficult.
You can figure it out.
Yeah.
It's a great tool.
And it is, and yeah, and it's more abstract. So, you know, what is it that you want from them, and then figure out if you're achieving that. And so, if it's just the sheer number of people, there's got to be a why to that. You know, it's not. I don't want somebody punishing you and saying, well, you know, your numbers are down. It may be that the weather was really great and they're just going outside instead of, you know, for like we just had a mild summer, so they didn't come inside as much. You know, it could be that simple. So it may have nothing to do with you. And so look at the metrics that are available that you can control, which is when they're here, are they safe? Are they happy? Are they engaged? Or are they just wandering around, looking bored? Are residents reporting that they're happy with the services? That kind of thing. Because it is nebulous. It is a little bit more, a little more abstract than that. Why else don't you delegate?
Because says, I want you to get this done.
Well, yeah, then you
say,
can't delegate
I
it.
want to have this guy do it. No, I want you to get this done. I don't have enough time. Oh, well, you better figure it out.
Okay. That's from experience, huh?
No.
Yeah. Then you're not delegating, period. Unless you want to have the longer conversation with the boss about why and make your case, but yeah, I think in that case you're just not delegating. But how many of you feel like it is harder to train somebody to do it or tell them what you want, not even train, but tell them what you want than to just do it yourself? It's an efficiency thing. Yeah? It's the number one reason. It's the number one reason people don't delegate. The second is they're afraid it won't be done right. And so they don't give it. What's the third reason? The third most common? No, that's actually number two. You're afraid it won't be done right. So you're going to keep it, yeah. Come on, ladies. I'm looking at you. Oh, I feel bad. I don't want to put this on them.
You feel bad, I like that I think that you're pawning.
Yep.
On them, so.
And you're not pawning, you're delegating. But you said it right there. That's the interpretation. More so women than men do too. Yeah. We just have a higher rate of doing it. In other words, that's about our number two versus number three overall. But number three overall is I feel bad asking somebody else to do it. Because maybe it was my role and I need them to do it because it needs to get done. And the most important thing is it gets done. And maybe I'm mired down with something else, I'm doing something else leadership-wise, and I've got to get this done, so I'm asking somebody to do it. Never once has somebody said, but that's your job. I've never had somebody say that to me. And yet I still feel like I can't hand that off to somebody. So there's a lot psychologically there with us, with us meaning everybody, with managers, that we can't ask somebody to take on more than we are. How many of you feel that way? I don't want to ask them to do more than I'm doing. Yeah, that's a big one. Or this one kills me, I can't ask somebody to do something I don't know how to do myself. Okay, if you're over 45, I'm going to go to age again. If you're over about 45, 50 years old, you have believed that or you have worked for somebody who believes that. Well, I should know how to do everything you're doing. And they actually get irritated. If, in fact, I had an experience, this shocked me. There's a woman I worked with who had a very specific knowledge about a field. It was diversity and inclusion was the field. But she had done she had worked with Forward Through Ferguson and the Ferguson Commission, and she was one of the commissioners. She had very specific knowledge in this area. And our boss was working on something and came and asked her opinion about it. And she gave her opinion and then came to me and said, can you believe that? She's the boss. She should know better than me. Why would she even be asking me about that? And she was really going off on her, and I was like, no, that's exactly what she should have done. She should have gone to the expert in this field and asked this question because you do have more knowledge than anybody else here. Well, then maybe I should be the boss. That attitude right there is why you're not, but you get the idea. Get rid of that idea. That is not true. I used to run an organization of 25 people. If I could do all their jobs, I wouldn't need them. I hired a therapist to serve the community because I'm not a therapist. I can't do her job. You're right. I don't want to be able to do her job because then I don't need her. So think about that you should understand what they're doing, yes, but you should not know how to do every piece of their job. That's a level of control that is unnecessary. If you do know because you used to do it, great, but it doesn't mean you should have to. And that idea has got to go away. It's got to go away. I'm just gonna go back. So that's in part also why we don't delegate, is I should be able to do it. I don't have the time to train you to do it. You won't do it right, or I feel bad dropping. There's other reasons too, but those are the big four. Remember that and challenge that if you have that experience, because it's difficult. Never delegate something confidential, personal, or disciplinary in nature The last thing you want is to say to somebody, well, I know that person needs to be talked to, but I don't have time today, so go ahead and punish them. I've never seen anybody do it, but it probably has happened. SMART tasks only, that is specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time-bound. You can always look up the SMART acronym. Delegate to whom? You may get the "this is not my job." That's why every job description has other duties as assigned. So find the person who has the right skills. What you don't want to do is press too hard on the person who's good all the time.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Delegate to whom? What's your feeling on challenging people? You think that you're ready to do it and you get some pushback? Like if you have someone, I've never done this before, well, I'm here as a resource if you have any problems, but I think you'd be good at this. I want to challenge you. Just
Yeah.
kind of be upfront. Is that the way?
Oh, yeah,
that way?
yeah. Yeah, especially, so in those cases, anytime you hear fear of anything, that's a fear-based response, but I don't know how to do that. What's in it for them? That is always the answer to a fear-based response, is what's in it for you. I want you to learn how to do this. I think you'd be really good at it. Okay, praise is in it for them. That's what you just gave them. Or, but I think that you have, these are for bigger things, but I think you have a role to play in this organization that is higher than the one that you're in, and this is going to help give you that foundation to, to know what has to be done to fill this role. So what's in it for them? Every time, and sometimes what's in it for them is just not having the negative outcome. My sister having a panic attack on a flight. My sister does not like to fly, and there was turbulence. We were only going to Chicago, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But there was turbulence, and she's freaking out. What's in it for her? And I'm like, you have to calm down. Why? Why do I have to calm down? Because I don't want you getting kicked off the plane. That's what's in it for her, is not having to make an emergency landing and kick my sister off because she's hyperventilating. So whatever it is, what's in it for them? Go to that. And you will get that pushback sometimes. And if the person says, you know what, I really don't care to learn this, okay. But that's going in your record. Even if it's this record, I'm sorry to hear that, because this is something I really think you should learn how to do. And I'm here to help you, help you through it. The other thing to remember is, or to remind them of, is perfection's not expected the first time. So, if I realize you're resisting because you think you have to do it right, you don't. You just have to do it. Because every time somebody learns how to do it, they didn't do it right the first time, probably the second time, third time. They might have done it 100 times right and did it wrong 2 times. That's life. So, and then clearly define those expectations. So I want you to think of delegation of any kind, even if it's just your tasks in staff meetings. Who, what, by when. If any of those 3 pieces are missing, you have a recipe for disaster. If the who is missing, how many of you have sat in a meeting and, well, we should do this, and yeah, I think we're gonna run this program this way, and then you come back to the next staff meeting and go, well, I thought you were gonna do that. Well, no, I thought you were gonna do that, because you didn't put a who. The what, we should, this is my favorite, when a politician says something like, I want a better future. What does that mean? There's no definition. We, the people in this room, are going to have a better future by next year. Great. I have a when and I have a who. What's a better future? That's completely abstract in the middle there. So that's where we're going to get very clear with what it is we're asking or need to get done. And then the time. The time is critical, because we do this constantly. We say, hey, can you get me that report? And then you come back at the end of the week and say, where is that? Oh, well, you didn't tell me. I thought I had till next week. And then you're aggravated, because why would they think until they had next? Because you didn't tell them otherwise. So make sure that we're giving them a who, a what, and by when. Give them loose enough reins to mess up, but to succeed as well. Check in enough, but not too much. In the case that you were talking about, check in just, hey, do you have any questions? You seemed a little nervous about this. I just want to make sure you don't need me for anything. And they may say yes or no, and you go from there. Praise and review process for the future. So what worked and what didn't? Not just what didn't work, but what worked. What went really well? What would you like to keep as behavior? One thing that frustrates me, and this is true about just who we are as human beings, in my coaching that I do with people, there is always a flip side to your strengths, and that is usually your weakness. We forget to flip it back over. And so what I'll get is somebody who comes to me with their performance review and says, Well, here you go. It's terrible. And let's say your scale is 1 to 5, 5 being excellent. You'll have a bunch of 5s, a few 4s, and 1 2. What are you focused on? The 2. And the evaluation's a disaster. No, it's not. You have 1 2. So what they're doing is hyper-focusing on that 2 and saying, I got to change it, I got to change it, I got to change it, I got to fix it. And maybe it's nothing really all that important, or maybe it's the flip side of a really exemplary strength. For example, I can only speak personally. I am a very visionary thinker. What does that mean for my ability to be very detail-oriented?
Terrible.
It sucks. It's terrible. So what I have to do is make sure that either I have to pay extra attention to the detail-oriented part of me without losing that, or surround myself with people who can help with that particular task. So know yourself enough to know where your gaps are, and understand that other people have them too. If you have somebody who is really a great rule follower and a person who can really hold a tight ship, it's probably also not the person who you're going to call on to be flexible. Just flip side of the strength. It doesn't mean they're completely inflexible, but I'm just saying that you may have a person who better fits that skill because they aren't quite as rigid in their personality. And rigidity is not a bad thing. It's very needed in a lot of situations. So knowing that that's a strength, your weakness is always going to be the flip side of that. Don't pull down so hard in trying to fix that weakness that you destroy the strength. All right, coaching. How many of you have ever had any kind of professional coaching? Okay, handful of you, good. Coaching is exactly what it sounds like. It's bringing a person from where they are to where they want to be. It is not discipline. It can include discipline, but it's not discipline. If you are having a conversation where you're saying, you better fix these things or else, that is a disciplinary conversation. Those are necessary, not saying they're not, but it is different than a coaching conversation. Because, and if you ever get confused, think of it literally as coaching, like a soccer team, baseball team, football team. There's a difference between pulling the player aside and saying, you're having a bad game. What's going on with you? Tell me what's happening. Why did you just make that move? There's a very big difference between that and you've been consistently bad for a very long time. I'm benching you and you might be off the team, right? Two very different things. The majority of the time, you're having the first conversation. You're not having the second. If you're having the second, it's past the point of coaching and it's disciplinary. So you're not having the you're not having the coaching conversation, you're having a disciplinary conversation. Coaching can include discipline. It can be me saying, you're not on the ball, what's going on? But it's not the severity of the disciplinary conversation. I want to be very clear about that because some of the stuff we'll talk about in the coaching conversation sounds nice and fluffy and, and it's like, well, I need to be harder than that. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you absolutely do. And if you are having the conversation that is leading to termination because in your mind you're letting this person go, that's different as well. You don't have to, you don't have to employ all of these. This is the person that you believe in and want to keep on your team, but is maybe slacking off in ways, or isn't even slacking off, just has strengths you'd like to push a little further, like you were saying. I just want to develop these things. The 4 P's of active listening come into play here. Posture, what's your eye contact and body position? Place should always be as private as possible. It doesn't have to be completely private, but removed from distractions. It's really hard to give coaching information when there's a lot going on around you and a lot of noise. Paraphrase, restate your points in your own words to qualify. So as they're talking to you and saying, well, here's my objective to taking on that project. I'm worried about time and I've never done it before. And okay, so you're worried there might be some time constraints. And I hear that you fear you might get it wrong, because you don't really know how to do it yet. That's paraphrasing. Nothing worse than when somebody says to you, I'm really frustrated with my team. So I hear you're really frustrated with your team. Oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that to people. It's paraphrasing. And what you're doing it for is to say, okay, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. And giving them the opportunity to go, nope, you're way off. Or, yeah, mostly, but I'd add this. That's why we're doing it. Probing is asking more questions to get more information. So if I were walking through a coaching conversation with you, if we're in person, I'm just sitting in the room with you. Normally they're by Zoom. And so I'm talking to you, making eye contact the best I can with the Zoom. And I'm facing the camera. I'm not distracted. It's quiet. I've removed the distractions from everything. As you're telling me what's going on, and usually when I'm coaching, it's like critical conversations, like, hey, I've got this person who's not doing what I need them to do. How am I going to coach them into, so I'm coaching the coach. And so I'm saying, okay, so what I'm understanding is this, or tell me what's going on in the department here, or what's the relationship between these people. So I'm doing the probing and the paraphrasing to make sure that I can help the person come up with a solution. You're really taking, you're taking the coaching position. You're not taking the boss position. We have a very different understanding, and they should be synonymous, but we have a very different understanding of what that means in our culture. Boss kind of comes down to this authoritarian do as I say, versus a coach being somebody who's there to help you develop, who's there to say, I want you to be the best team member you can be. And that is what you want, because that's less headache for you. They're doing their job really well. If you are good at coaching, you won't just be fixing problems, you are going to be helping them develop into the person that they should be. I'm working on a strategic plan for the St. Louis County government right now, and I asked if the staff in this particular unit had professional development plans. And the answer shocked me. No, it didn't shock me that much, because maybe they're not thinking about it, but it was like, no. It's like, what? Why? Why would we do that? Because you're not just fixing problems. I don't want your staff, who is probably underpaid and overworked already, to not know that they're being developed as people, and to not know that you are investing in them in other ways. And I don't even mean monetarily. I just mean like, hey guys, I'm going to share this article with you. It's really interesting. Or, hey, why don't we do a brown bag lunch together outside today? Whatever it is, just to get out of the office. But it's not just about fixing the problems. It's about helping the person really be who they can be. And it is not only about your organization. One of the best compliments you can get, I know it's trouble, but it is a compliment, is when somebody moves on to something better, because you've prepared them for that. That means you've been a good leader. And they say, the only reason I'm leaving is I'm going to make double the money. That position doesn't exist here. I'm going to make double the money, and this is the next progression in my career. Good for you. And we should be happy about that. We're not happy about filling the spot, but we're happy that they're moving on. Stay in touch with your team and use interaction to create that positive climate. Just like a coach on a team, on a sports team, have you ever seen one who was just a tyrant and everyone hated them, and yet they were still successful? Not very often. Maybe once or twice, but it would be quite the outlier. That positive climate is really important. Making sure that your team knows that you support them. Who does this really well is Andy, what's his name? Chiefs coach. Andy Reid, thank you. He was his first name. If you watch how he talks to his team, very positive climate. He's constantly like, it's okay, it's all right, it's good, we're all good. That's sort of his attitude. Each of you is different as a leader. Be who you are. Some of you are that, some of you are more the encourager. That's what I would call him. He's just the, like, okay, it's all right, we got this. He's just kind of quiet and, yeah, we're doing it. You have the yellers, who are more your activator types. You have the speak softly and carry a big stick. There's a lot of personalities. They're all equally good. One of the most frustrating conversations I ever had with one of my coaching clients is he said, but I need you to tell me, what a good leader looks like. And I said, I can give you the characteristics, the broad characteristics. Yeah, but what do I need to say? Well, he wanted like, a script, a model. And I said, that doesn't exist, because there's a lot of different ways you can achieve that goal. And it has to do with the underlying characteristics. Do you have the trust and respect of your team? Are you encouraging them? Are you creating a positive climate that is free of toxicity? Those are the characteristics. How you do it is up to you. And it doesn't have to be a soft touch or a hard touch, or these things that people grapple with, like, well, you shouldn't be too harsh if you're a leader. You shouldn't be too soft if you're a leader. Be you, because there's ways to achieve this no matter what kind of personality you have. And take the time to ask the non-judgmental questions and visit with team members. If we want to get good at it, we keep things private. We don't share with everybody else what we're talking about in coaching. And if you are going to, you're going to ask to share it. I have worked with teams before where somebody has brought something up in coaching where I realized either it was just really good information, or that several of their team members were experiencing the same thing. And so I would say to them, this is private and I'll keep it private, but what you just brought up is I know the experience of several of your other team members. Would you care if we talked about this as a group? And so just make sure that they don't mind it being public. Most of the time they don't, because usually it's just stuff like, oh, I'm frustrated with this process that we're doing. It's nothing personal. It's just something that would benefit everybody. Give feedback as close to the performance event as possible. If you were a coach of a sports team, let's just say soccer, and you're watching your team member dribble the ball down your own goal, towards your own goal, what would you do? Yeah, you'd start screaming, turn around. What are you doing? You're about to score for them. Would you go, oh, that's too bad, I'm gonna have to talk to him about that in 3 months when we have our evaluation? No, that's absurd. Of course you wouldn't, because that would be absurd. So what we tend to do is give that feedback once a year at the evaluation, or quarterly, or next time I see them, and in a situation where it's quiet, but it's 3 weeks later. Give it as close as you can to the event. And that's good and bad feedback. So if they did something really good, also give them the feedback as close to the event. I'm not saying it has to be inappropriately on time. And by inappropriately, I mean, if there's no place to get quiet, if you're not going to see them until Monday, you don't have to call them on Friday night. I mean, it has to be appropriate, but as close as possible to the event so that they can use that information. I had a job once where I was a vice president, and I had been there a year. And throughout the year, I did check in every once in a while, even though I'm Gen X. Just figured if there was a problem, they'd come tell me. But I did check in, every once in a while with my boss, just like, okay, is this how you want this done? Or is this, the program running the way that you think it should be running? Yeah, everything's great. And she was always very complimentary. And even to people like that we would meet outwardly, just, oh, she's one of my stars, look at her, this is great. I'm like, okay, so I'm doing a good job, great. Get to my annual evaluation. And I was handed an 8-page document with every single mistake I had made in the last year. I mean, down to an email that I sent that had a punctuation error in it. Every mistake that I had made for the last year was in this document. And when I say 8 pages, that sounds like I was a horrible employee. Believe me, you make 8 pages worth of mistakes in a year. I mean, like one of them, and it was stuff I didn't even know. One of them is I let my employee go home early. She was my employee. I mean, indirectly hers, but this was somebody who worked for me who said, I've got a sick kid, can I leave at 3 to go pick her up? Of course, yeah. And this was not a person who violated that, and I knew that. But it was probably 3 months into my tenure there, and it was documented in there, you let her go home an hour and a half early because she had a sick kid, but you didn't ask me. I didn't know I was supposed to. And I was like, and just so you know, she probably did it 5 more times. I don't. How long do you think I lasted there? 2 days. I put in my resignation 2 days later. I was not going to work with a person like that. No way. No way. Talk about moving your goal. When you don't give the feedback close to the performance, you talk about breaking trust. I didn't trust anything that came out of her mouth after that. Because she had been telling me for a year that I was doing a good job. Like minor things. She would just come and go, can we do this instead of this? But nothing significant, ever. Nothing that made me think that I was not doing a good job. And even this 8-page document didn't make me think I was doing a terrible job. But it was her reason for giving me a 3% raise instead of 5%. And she's like, and it's all there while you're only getting 3%. I'm like, you have to get 3% is what I expect. That's the normal raise. You're just, anyway. So the point being, it is toxic when we do that to people. When we dump on them that we've been saving it up. This rule also applies for past grievances. And this rule applies at home. You do not get to go to your spouse or your children and say, well, I know we're talking about this now, but remember 5 months ago when you said this to me? Nope. If you do not, and this, I want you to remember this rule, if you do not deal with your complaints now, you forfeit the right to be angry about it. Period. If you do not deal with it now, you forfeit the right to be angry about it. Have I forfeited the right? Yep, more times than I care to admit. Meaning I get on the other side of it and go, yeah, I probably, even with my husband, it might be something that he hurt my feelings, I didn't say anything. I get 2 weeks down the road and go, that really hurt. But do I turn around and go, you know what, I'm mad at you for what you did 2 weeks ago? No, nope, it's on me to let it go. And it's on me to say to myself, Now you know better. The next time this happens, you need to stand up for yourself and, and not let that thing be said that hurt your feelings. Yeah.
So how do you give someone, I'll use this term, even though I may not mean it necessarily, but how do you give someone grace without ignoring a pattern of behavior?
That's a great question. Understanding why they are the way that they are is the first step toward successfully dealing with it. I'll say it that way. So meaning you have to give the grace in order to even understand. The problem is we try to address behavior we don't understand. Okay? So that grace comes in understanding the person who has autism. Okay? That's a good example. And it's a bad example because there's a lot of things we can't change about that. But when I deal with my nephew, there are things that he says that is because it's so honest, Like, I mean, he is not beyond, hi, Angeli, good to see you. Looks like you've gained 5 pounds. Great, buddy, thanks. I know why he's doing it. And he's getting this much grace from me because of it. But it doesn't excuse the behavior. And so I still have to address the behavior. To which, something comes back like, good to see you, buddy. Look like you didn't use a comb today. Because that's how we are in our family. It's really funny about it. But his parents, my brother and sister-in-law, know this also. And they do give some grace, like, there he goes again. It's like, I don't even have it in me to fight him today. But most of the time, hey, buddy, remember we said that could be a hurtful thing? Oh, yeah, sorry. It's just, so it doesn't excuse the behavior. It's giving you a reason for it and a boundary to work with. Like somebody else who could say, you look like you gained 5 pounds, back at the middle finger. He's not, he's getting grace, but it's not excusing the behavior. Does that make sense? And so sometimes you are letting it go, but eventually you are going to have to address the behavior. Another really good example of this is somebody with PTSD, with trauma. There are a lot of emotional problems that come with that. And so understanding that the person is coming from, let's say that somebody was really, and this is a real thing, in an abusive workplace, screamed at all the time, threatened to be fired, whatever it is. And that person comes into your work environment, and it seems like every bit of feedback you give them kind of makes them wince. They just, I've seen it, they just, okay. You understand it. And you might let certain things go because of it, but eventually you're going to have to sit down and say, this isn't healthy for you or me. So let's figure out, I'm not going to do this. This is not that place. And you're going to have that conversation to stop the behavior. Is there something specific you're thinking about?
Yeah, like let's say something dealing with like punctuality or deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to micromanage or
Yeah.
constantly be looking over that person's shoulder to make sure they're doing what's necessary. But at the same time, it's like if you've seen it a couple of times, I can't help but take those times into consideration to say, okay, this isn't a one-time thing. This isn't even a two-time thing. This is now an established pattern, in my opinion. And this is something that we need to, discuss. I could have said something to you the first or second time, but I tried to allow you to self-correct. That didn't happen, so.
You're right. That's the way you handle it. So I didn't say this when I was talking about the, deal with the behavior immediately. That's if it's egregious behavior. We all have those moments where we're late for work. Do I want you guys to go, why are you late? No, let it go. It's fine. But you're exactly right. 3 times is a pattern. So it's funny because you're like 1 time, 2 times, but now you instinctively know 3 times is a pattern. So when we're addressing that, we may have let it go for, it may have been 6 months ago. And then, and maybe it's, being late 6 months ago, being late today, I'm probably not going to conflate the two. But something like maybe they snapped at someone, but it was 6 months ago and you're like, okay, I'm just having a bad day. I'm not, it wasn't anything too terrible, I want to go. And then they do it again. And then they do it again. And even if it's a year apart, snapping at people is not acceptable behavior. So that's when you're going to go and say, you know what? My rule is to deal with things as close to the fact that, when they happen. However, I also like to give people grace. And I didn't know if you were just having a bad day that day. And then the second time it happened, I thought, again, maybe just a bad day. But this is the 3rd time it's happened. And and it's offensive to people. Or whatever, whatever the feedback is you're giving them. So you're explaining to the person why you didn't deal with it before. It's not, you're not saying to them, I didn't deal with this because I didn't know if it was an issue yet. but now it is an issue. And that's how you deal with it. And that's for those smaller behaviors that, again, as standalone things, may not be that bad. If someone's late one time, that's not that bad depending on their job or how late they were. But if it's, if they do it 2 or 3 times, it's a problem. And then you have to decide what grace you're going to give them beyond that. Meaning, why is the person late? And if you find out that they've been late, 3 times in the past 6 months, but it's because they have an elderly parent living with them and they're the caretaker, if it's not a big deal, you might say, okay, just try to be on time. And, you may give them a little more grace. That's up to you as a manager and the function of the job. But you're spot on with how you should respond to that, which is, I didn't deal with this before because it wasn't a pattern, it's a pattern. And the pattern is the problem. I mean, the behavior is the problem, but the pattern of it is the problem. Does that answer it? Okay. This is where we get into these two. Remember I said observable behavior before? If I'm not giving you feedback in observable behavior, it's useless. I'm going to give you one of my favorite examples, and I think this gentleman's going to love it because he said that he thinks he's coming up on people that way. There's one of my coaching clients was having his annual review, and the feedback he was given is he was intimidated. Okay, what does that mean? What behaviors do you recognize as intimidating? Now you can use your imagination right now and tell me, there's probably some things. He had no idea. He thought and thought and thought, couldn't figure out what he had done and he worked with, just in his immediate unit, there was 5 women. He's about 6'3", I'm gonna guess, I'm just kind of a bigger guy. The women in his unit are, nothing's bad, but they're smaller. Like he said, they're all under 5 feet, I swear, So he's like, they must mean that I'm physically intimidating. So what I was telling you about my client was he's physically a tall man, bigger man, and he thought that what they meant by intimidating was that he was working in this environment with women, and maybe he was doing something to physically intimidate them. And I said, given what this company was, I was like, I don't think that's it. And he said, no, that has to be it. They're calling me fat. That's what he said. And I said, I don't think that's it. So pushed back, asked him to ask for observable behavior. They didn't give it to him, which made me more frustrated. And I said, what do you mean? Well, I don't know, just intimidating. He said, that's what they said. And I said, that's not an acceptable answer. If they're going to give you feedback like this, they need to tell you what you're doing, what's observable that makes this, a quote unquote offensive, whatever it is. Turns out, when he really pushed back and said, I need examples, he sat with his arms crossed, that was one of them, and he had written a few emails in all caps. That's what it was. Had nothing to do with his physical size at all. But that's, you understand how people walk away with these crazy ideas, and it's not crazy, but these ideas that are false in their minds because we don't give them the truth. So you have to contextualize that truth, especially if it's an abstract piece of feedback we're giving them. If I say to you, people find you condescending, I have to describe what condescending behavior you're engaging in. When you say this happens. When you roll your eyes, this is what people see. So I have to give them examples of that behavior. If you don't have those examples, if you can't put it into observation, you're not ready to give the feedback. You can know it all day long. You can say to yourself, oh, he's so smug. You can know that, but what does smug mean? What is he doing that makes you think that that person is smug? So we've got to be able to define that in observable terms and give examples of that. Keep that in mind. Otherwise, we're setting somebody up for heartache and to think the wrong thing about themselves and the feedback that they're getting. So in recap, your best practices are learning, leading by example, respect, and finding the answers. If you leave with nothing else today, my big things are that you attend to the respect that you have with you and your staff and know that that differs depending on your values, and so you'll have to know how they understand that. It doesn't mean you change your values, it just means you have to understand how they understand it. Trust, the trust factor is critical. That might even be number one. In fact, in a study that was conducted 85 years running by, I think it was by Gallup, across the world, there were over 100 countries in this study, they asked, what's the number one thing you need from your boss? That was the question, is, from your leadership, what do you need? Every single country, trust was number one except for China. Inspiration was number one in China, and trust was number two.
What was number one, I'm sorry?
Inspiration. I don't know why, but it was. They want to be inspired. But every other country, and this is for 85 years running, And in China, that was the exception, I think 2 years. Otherwise, it was trust also. But for 85 years running, trust was number one. That's how important it is. Communicate effectively. And if you're not sure, ask. Ask how you're coming across. Hey, when I said this, did you understand what I was saying? Or, I just, in reflection, I'm not sure I made my point accurately. You can ask those questions. That kind of vulnerability is appreciated usually. Delegate. Delegate, delegate, delegate. It's not pawning off anything. I love that word because that's where my mind goes to the guilt of pawning. It's not pawning. It's helping get the job done. And if you're not sure, if it's your ego talking, ask yourself what's best for the organization. In other words, is it going to harm the organization if I delegate this? Meaning, I'm shirking my responsibility. That would harm the organization. Most of the time, you're going to realize, no, actually, this is just getting this thing done, and it has to get done, and that's better for the organization, so I need to put my ego in check. And finally, coaching others. Using observable behavior, feedback in real time. Don't let them run towards your goal without intervention. And that intervention, yes, can sometimes be disciplinary, can be not harsh, but like, hey, what are you doing? Now, you don't have to use those words, but you have to stop them. You have to intervene and say, whoa, hold on. I don't even think you realize you're running completely down the wrong side of the field. Let's redirect. Remember that being a coach is being a coach. And your job is to help develop other people into the best versions of themselves. So with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions that you might have that you've hopefully haven't been thinking this whole time that you were asking in real time. But if you have any others, I'll also be here for a couple minutes after while you fill out your evaluations if you just want to ask me a private question. Excuse me. And finally, if there's questions that you have or things you want to talk about that you think, I don't want to bring them up in here, no problem. Just email your PAS person and say, hey, Julie taught a class, and I'm looking to ask this question, and they'll put me in touch with you, and we'll walk through whatever the issue is.